Physician once objected to Elvis bringing home a large box of drugs from a dentist's office.
A dentist who treated Elvis Presley for years walked out of his office on August 16, 1977, with a private set of dental x-rays that he'd locked away for 47 years. Why did he hide those x-rays for nearly half a century? And what exactly was recorded there? The King's final smile. The dentist who has looked after Elvis Presley's teeth for several years was going about his normal working day, doing what he always does, seeing his patients one by one, and doing his job carefully and professionally the way he has always done it. Elvis walks into his office, and something is different about him today. Not different in a way that is easy to point at and name, but what the dentist notices is that Elvis seems far away, like a man whose body is present in the room, but whose mind is somewhere else entirely. His eyes have something in them that the dentist cannot quite name. Not sadness and not illness, but something sitting between the two. Something like the look of a person who has already made a big decision that nobody around them knows about yet. A person who is carrying something heavy and private, and has been carrying it for long enough that the weight of it has started showing on his face, started leaking into the way he holds himself in the chair. The dentist takes a final set of dental x-rays, which is a perfectly routine thing to do. Nothing unusual about it, just a normal part of a normal appointment. And yet, when the appointment is over and Elvis has left and the office is quiet again, the dentist does something he does not entirely understand himself. He makes copies of those x-rays and files them separately, away from the main records, in a private place, because something inside him, some quiet instinct he cannot explain with words, tells him to keep them. Elvis leaves the way he always leaves, polite and warm in that genuine way of his, the way that always surprised people who expected someone that famous to be difficult. And the door closes behind him, and the day continues, and the dentist goes back to his work not knowing that this is the last time, not knowing that the next time he hears that name on the radio, the words attached to it will stop the whole world in its tracks, will make millions of people put down whatever they are holding and simply stand completely still. That night he could not sleep, and for a very long time, he will not understand why. The day the news broke. The radio says it first, cutting straight through the middle of an ordinary afternoon, with the kind of urgency that tells you, before the words even form properly, that something enormous has happened. And the words, when they come, are simple and terrible, and the dentist hears them and feels the ordinary afternoon around him just fall apart. Because what the radio is saying is that Elvis Presley is dead, found at Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee. And the cause is being reported as heart failure, and the world is trying to take this in, and finding it almost impossible. He turns the television on the way. Everyone turns the television on when something this big happens, because you need to see it as well as hear it. Need the pictures to confirm what the words have told you, and the screen fills with reporters standing outside Graceland and fans gathering on the pavement with their flowers and their tears. And the grief coming through the television is so real and so enormous that it fills the room he is sitting in. And he watches all of it with the same stunned disbelief that millions of other people are feeling at this exact same moment. But he is watching with something extra that most of those other people do not have. A layer of professional knowledge sitting underneath his grief like a stone at the bottom of a river. Because as the medical details start coming out and the official story begins to take its shape, through the news reports and the statements, the dentist finds himself listening with the sharp attention of someone who has records, who has x-rays, who has spent years looking closely at this specific person through the honest and precise lens of dental imaging. And something is not adding up. It is small. The thing that is not adding up. Small enough that nobody without his specific training would ever notice it. But to him, it is as clear and as insistent as an alarm going off in a quiet room. And he gets up from where he is sitting and goes to the private place where he filed those copies. And he takes them out and holds them up and looks at them carefully in the light of everything he has just been told. And what he sees when he does that is the thing that will keep him awake that night. Not dramatically awake, not pacing the floor or talking to himself, but quietly and persistently awake in the way that people are when something true and troubling has lodged itself in their mind. The dentist laid in the dark and thought about the x-rays and about what the news was saying and about the gap between the two. And the gap does not close no matter how long he stared at it. The x-rays that didn't match. After August 16, 1977, the dentist went back to his normal life, seeing patients every day, writing his notes, going home in the evenings, doing all the ordinary things that ordinary life requires. But underneath all of that normality, something was running quietly and constantly, like an engine left on in an empty room. A question he could not answer and could not walk away from. A question that followed him through every single day without ever getting tired of following him. The conspiracy theories started appearing the way they always do after something enormous happens, slowly at first, and then faster and faster. Ordinary people and determined researchers and former insiders all picking up pieces of the story and holding them up to the light and asking the questions that the official version had left unanswered. And the dentist watched all of this from a safe distance, reading and listening without saying a single word. A man sitting quietly on top of a secret he did not yet know how to handle. When people started talking about dental records, when researchers began comparing the autopsy paperwork against other available documents and finding things that did not quite line up, the dentist went to his desk and pulled out his private copies and laid them flat and began his own quiet comparison, bringing every bit of training and attention he had built up over years of professional practice. Not looking for a story, but looking for the truth. Not searching for drama, but searching for the simple agreement between one set of images and another. What he found made him sit back in his chair and stare at the ceiling for a very long time, because the differences were there, small enough that most people would never see them, but absolutely there. A spacing between two teeth that did not match. A crown sitting at a slightly wrong angle, a bone density detail that raised a question with no easy answer. And he wrote everything down with the careful precision of a man who understands that details matter, that the small things are often the most important things. Each discrepancy on its own could be explained away, could be put down to variation or error, or the imprecision of old equipment, but all of them together formed a picture that the dentist could not make peace with, could not simply file away and forget. And so he did what a careful and frightened man does when he finds something he does not know how to carry alone. He documented everything, locked it away, and said absolutely nothing to absolutely nobody. Pressure from powerful people. He had not told anyone what he found, had kept the whole thing locked inside his professional silence the way he had always kept the private details of his patients. But somehow, in the way that secrets sometimes attract attention, even when they are perfectly hidden, the phone calls started coming, and the first one arrived on an ordinary weekday morning when he was between patients, a voice on the other end that was polite and pleasant and completely unremarkable in every way, except for the thing it was actually saying underneath all that politeness. The caller reminded him of his professional obligations, spoke warmly about the importance of patient privacy, used all the correct and reasonable language that made the conversation sound entirely legitimate, and the dentist listened and responded carefully and hung up the phone and sat quietly for a moment, understanding that the conversation he had just had was not really about patient privacy at all, was about something else entirely, was about the copies sitting in his private files and whether he intended to do anything with them. More calls came after that first one, and they followed a pattern that the dentist came to recognize. Each one a little less warm than the one before, each one applying a little more pressure beneath the same polished surface of reasonableness, moving from gentle reminders to firm suggestions, to something that stopped just short of a direct warning, but carried the weight of one regardless. And he understood that somewhere out there people knew what he had, or suspected what he had, and wanted very much to know what he planned to do with it. His dental files were formally requested, a proper official request that came through the correct channels with the correct paperwork, and he provided what he was required to provide and said nothing about the copies, the private set he had filed separately in that careful hidden place on the day of Elvis's last appointment. The ones he had kept because of a feeling, and those copies he did not mention and did not hand over and did not acknowledge in any way, understanding instinctively that once they left his possession they would disappear forever. The question that sat in the middle of all of this, the question he turned over constantly in the quiet of his own mind, was why? Because old dental x-rays belonging to a deceased patient are not the kind of thing that powerful people normally spend their time pursuing, are not the kind of documents that generate phone calls and formal requests and carefully applied pressure. And the fact that these particular x-rays were generating exactly that kind of attention told him something important, told him that whatever he had found in his quiet private comparison was not nothing, was not a mistake, was not something that could be safely ignored by the people who needed it to go away. The coroner's quiet, confusion. Around the same time that the phone calls were coming in, whispers were beginning to circulate from a completely different direction. Whispers that had nothing to do with dental records, but that pointed toward the same uneasy territory. Whispers about the autopsy itself and the people who had been involved in it, and the things that some of those people had reportedly said in private in the years since August 16, 1977. Things that did not sit entirely comfortably alongside the official version of events. The dentist heard these whispers the way he heard everything related to this subject, carefully and quietly and from a distance, adding them to the picture he had been building in his mind for years. And what struck him about the coroner's reported remarks was not their content exactly, but their tone. The particular quality of uncertainty in them, the sense of a professional man who had done his job and signed his name and walked away, and then spent the years afterward unable to entirely convince himself that everything he had signed his name to was everything there was to know. He began to look more carefully at the timeline of that day, at the sequence of events at Baptist Memorial Hospital, at the speed with which certain conclusions had been reached, and certain documents had been completed, and certain doors had been closed. And the more carefully he looked, the more questions accumulated. Because timelines that move very fast in the immediate aftermath of an unexpected death are timelines that sometimes move fast for a reason. Sometimes move fast because someone needs them to reach their conclusion before anyone has time to slow down and look carefully at the details. The question of whether dental records could have been interfered with, whether the documents that ended up in the official file were the same documents that should have been there, was a question the dentist was almost afraid to ask himself directly, because asking it directly meant following it to its conclusion, and its conclusion was a place that changed everything, that turned a tragedy into something deliberate, and a death into something managed. And the dentist was a careful and conservative man who did not go to extraordinary conclusions without extraordinary evidence. But the phone calls kept coming, and the whispers kept circulating, and the copies in his private files kept sitting there with their small and stubborn discrepancies. And the combination of all three things together made the extraordinary conclusion feel less extraordinary with every passing month, made the impossible question feel less impossible, made the dentist understand that whatever had happened on August 16, 1977 in Memphis, Tennessee, the full truth of it had not yet been told to the world. A faced the world, never fully saw. The funeral at Graceland happened fast, just 2 days after the news broke, and the casket was closed. And the dentist watched the coverage on his television the way the whole world watched it. The tens of thousands of people lining the streets outside the mansion. The flowers piled so high they looked like something from a dream. The grief so enormous and so genuine that it came through the screen and sat in the room with you. And somewhere inside all of that, he was aware of the closed casket and what it meant that the casket was closed. The official explanation was dignity, was the family's desire to protect the memory of Elvis as the world had known and loved him, rather than as illness and time had left him. And it was a reasonable explanation, the kind of explanation that most people accepted without question, because grief makes people generous with explanations, makes people willing to take the simple answer when the simple answer is offered with kindness. And most of the people watching that funeral coverage did exactly that, accepted the explanation and focused their attention on the grief rather than the questions. But there were people who had been inside the mansion, people who had attended the private viewing before the public mourning began. And some of those people said things afterward that lodged themselves in the collective memory of everyone who was paying careful attention. Small observations delivered quietly and without drama, a comment about the face looking different, a remark about the presence being somehow absent, the particular kind of observation that comes not from imagination, but from the specific discomfort of seeing something that does not quite match the picture stored in your memory. The dentist heard these accounts and processed them through his own particular professional lens, because his relationship with Elvis's physical reality was not about the face or the presence or the ineffable quality of a performer's energy in a room. His relationship was with something much more precise and much more measurable than any of that, with the interior architecture of a human mouth, with the spacing and the placement and the density that X-rays reveal, with the same impartiality that they have always revealed, regardless of who is asking the question or what answer they are hoping to find. Teeth do not lie. He had always believed this, had built his entire professional life on the reliability of this fact. And X-rays are like fingerprints in their specificity, like signatures that the body writes for itself, and that cannot be forged without leaving evidence of the forgery. And it was this belief, this bedrock professional certainty, that made the discrepancies in his private comparisons so impossible to set aside, so resistant to the reasonable explanations he kept reaching for and kept finding insufficient, so stubbornly present in his mind, no matter how many years he spent trying to make peace with them. 47 years of silence. The decades came and went the way decades do, one folding quietly into the next without asking permission. And the dentist grew older, and his hair went gray, and his hands developed the slight tremor that comes with age. And through all of it, the copies stayed exactly where he had put them. Locked away from the world, but never once locked away from his own thoughts. Never far from his mind, no matter how ordinary the day around him was. He watched the documentaries when they appeared, and there were many of them over the years, serious ones and sensational ones, and everything in between. Researchers and journalists and former insiders all circling the same unanswered questions from different directions. And he sat in front of his television and watched with the particular attention of a man listening for something specific, listening to hear if anyone else had found what he had found in his private files. Nobody was asking it quite the right way. Nobody had the specific piece he was sitting on, and the fans kept believing, and the skeptics kept dismissing, and the official story kept standing like a wall that nobody had quite managed to bring down, and the dentist kept his silence through all of it, kept it the way you keep something that has become so much a part of you, that releasing it feels like losing something essential about yourself. He told himself many things over those 47 years, told himself that discrepancies had innocent explanations he simply had not found yet, told himself that one man's private X-rays were not enough to overturn an official record the whole world had accepted, told himself that speaking up would cost him everything and change nothing. And these things were all just true enough to be useful, just true enough to carry him through another year, and then another year after that. But the X-rays stayed locked away, and the question stayed alive in his mind, and the truth stayed exactly where it had always been, waiting with the patience of something that knows it will eventually be found. And the dentist grew old enough to finally understand that the right time he had always been waiting for was never going to announce itself dramatically, was simply going to arrive one day dressed as an ordinary moment, and he was going to have to be brave enough to choose. The shocking comparison. The decision to allow a private review did not happen all at once. It was not a single dramatic moment of courage, but a slow and gradual loosening of the grip that fear had kept for nearly 5 decades. And when it finally happened, it was quiet and careful, and conducted with the kind of discretion the dentist had practiced his entire professional life. A small group of experts brought together privately to look at something no one outside his locked cabinet had ever been allowed to see. The X-rays were laid out side by side, the ones from before August 16, 1977, alongside the records from the official documentation. And the experts did what trained experts do. They looked carefully and methodically, and without the emotional investment that this particular subject matter so easily generates. Going through the images with the slow, deliberate attention of professionals who understand that rushing past a single detail is exactly the same as missing it completely and permanently. The spacing was the first thing they noted, a measurable difference between 2 specific teeth that sat just outside the range of normal variation. Not dramatic and not obvious, but consistent and documentable across multiple images in a way that ruled out a single bad angle or a single imaging error, and the experts noted it carefully and moved on to the next detail and the next, building their observations quietly the way real evidence is always built, slowly and without drama. The crown placement was the detail that stopped the room completely. A specific molar whose position in the post-death records did not correspond precisely with its position in the earlier X-rays. A small difference in angle that a non-professional would walk straight past, but that to a trained eye was as clear and measurable as anything else in those images. And one expert sat back and looked at the ceiling for a long, quiet moment before choosing his words with the careful weight they deserved. The dentist sat across the table and watched the faces of the experts and felt 47 years of carried weight shift inside him. Not disappear and not resolve into clean relief, but shift, move slightly, as if the secret he had carried alone for so long was finally being held by enough hands to make it fractionally lighter. And outside the room, the world continued normally, not yet knowing that inside this quiet meeting, the story of August 16, 1977 had just become more complicated than ever before. Protection or cover-up? The question sitting underneath everything else in this story, the question that the dental x-rays and the closed casket and the sealed autopsy report and all the whispered accounts point toward without quite answering, is not simply whether Elvis faked his death, but why, because the why is the part that makes the whole theory either believable or impossible. And it is always the part that the people who knew Elvis best have been most careful and most reluctant to discuss openly. By 1977, Elvis was exhausted in a way that went much deeper than simply tired, the kind of exhaustion that builds over decades of living at an intensity no human body is designed to sustain. The schedules and the performances and the medications and the crushing weight of being the most famous entertainer on earth, all pressing down on him from every direction at once. And the people closest to him in those final years describe a man who felt not just unwell, but completely and utterly trapped. The prescription medication was a significant part of his story by that point, a dependence that had developed over many years and that the people around him had managed and enabled and, in some cases, actively supplied. And the complexity of that situation meant that walking away through any normal means was essentially impossible, meant that if Elvis truly wanted out of the life he was living, he would need to find an exit as extraordinary and as carefully planned as the life itself had been. Could someone powerful have helped him disappear? Could the machinery of management and money that surrounded him have been turned toward engineering an exit rather than managing a career? These are the questions the dentist's x-rays push back to the surface, and they are questions without clean answers, without the kind of evidence that closes a case and satisfies everyone. And the people who believe and the people who dismiss are both working from the same incomplete picture, both reaching their conclusions from genuine uncertainty. The dentist himself has never claimed to know exactly what happened, has only ever said that the records deserve a second look, that the images in his private files raise questions the official documents do not fully answer, and that 47 years of silence has not made those questions smaller, but larger. Not easier to dismiss, but significantly harder. And whether that means Elvis walked away from everything, or whether it means something else entirely, he is always left for other people to decide. The king's smile lives on. He is older now, this dentist, old in the way that people get when they have carried something heavy for a very long time, when the shape of a secret has become so familiar that even after speaking you still feel its outline in the place where it used to live. And he sits quietly and reflects on the 47 years that passed between filing those copies and finally allowing someone else to look at them. And he says he does not regret the silence exactly, but cannot entirely defend it either. He never claimed Elvis was alive. He is clear about this, and never put his professional reputation behind the most dramatic version of the theory. And what he said was always something smaller and more careful and more honest. That the records deserve another look, that his private images contain details the official documentation does not account for. That questions raised by dental x-rays are not emotional questions, but technical ones. And that technical questions deserve honest technical answers, rather than decades of carefully maintained silence. Graceland still stands, and people still come from every corner of the world, still walk through its rooms and stand at the grave, and feel the particular grief of mourning someone they never met, but somehow knew deeply. The grief of losing a voice that felt personal even when it was reaching millions simultaneously. And the legend of Elvis Presley keeps growing rather than fading with the years. Keeps generating new conversations and new investigations and new moments where someone with a piece of the story decides the time has finally come. And somewhere in a quiet and carefully maintained safe, the x-rays still exist. Still hold inside their images whatever truth they have always contained. Still wait with the patience of objects that do not feel the pressure of time the way people do. And the dentist looks at the camera and says simply that he does not know the whole truth, only that his piece of it deserves to be part of the conversation, deserves to be examined honestly, and without the fear that kept one quiet professional man silent for 47 long and heavy years. He says it softly, almost to himself as much as to the camera. The thing that started everything, the thing he has never been able to move past, no matter how many reasonable explanations he reached for over the decades. And it is the same thing he thought on the night the news broke, and he pulled out his copies and held them up to the light and felt the floor shift beneath him. Teeth do not lie, he says quietly, and that has always been the problem.